How did the Disney Corporation acquire all the land for Walt Disney World? In this episode, we tell that story. What up, Opinioneers? Welcome to episode 119 of the WDW Opinion podcast. My name is Connor Brown, and I'm a former cast member, author, blogger, travel agent, and a Walt Disney World expert, and I am helping you plan for and daydream about your next perfect Walt Disney World vacation. If you're a new listener here, welcome to the show. Feel free to go back and check out all of our old podcast episodes covering a wide variety of Disney-related topics. And you can subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. If you're a longtime listener, welcome back. Thanks for being here. If you continue to enjoy the show, please consider sharing it with a friend you think might enjoy it as well. And please be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcast if you enjoy this show too. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks for tuning in. You'll see that I am still currently in the undisclosed Florida location outside of Orlando. Plane flying overhead. You may or may not be able to hear. Lovely day in the 70s. I'm sure it'll get up to the, 120s by the afternoon. That's kind of how it works here. But as of right now, this morning, nice, crisp, cool, beautiful breeze. We're outside. You can see that if you're watching on YouTube. And if you are doing so, be sure to hit the like button on this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. And if you do ever want to check out the video version of the show, head over to youtube.com/WDW Opinion to check it out. Of course, for the last few weeks, I've been producing a new offering from WDW Opinion, a new weekly show called News to Opinion. Comes out every Thursday, and with that show, I cover the latest Disney parks news stories, and then I share my thoughts and opinions on them. A lot of fun, super informative. There's so much important news coming out in the Disney parks world. This Thursday, our episode will be all about the Disney Genie Plus launch. So that's launching later this month. It's actually launching next week. And on Thursday's episode of News to Opinion, I'm going to cover everything you need to know about it. I'm going to cover what's offered in it, what are the tiers of the attractions, all that. So be sure to be on the lookout for that show when it comes out this Thursday. It's going to be super, super important. You can check out past episodes of News to Opinion right in this podcast feed or on our YouTube channel. So be sure to subscribe. And that way you can get the next episode when it comes out this Thursday. With that all out of the way, let's get to the main segment. Aaron Goldberg is the award-winning author of many Disney-specific books. And his latest book, Buying Disney's World, is a fantastic read. I read it like in one weekend, cover to cover. Great book, great story. He's an awesome author. We had a great conversation about the book. We talked about some of the stories involved in the buying of Walt Disney World, the acquisition of all that land. Be sure to stick around until the end of the interview because I will be sharing details on how you can win some of Aaron's books and a $50 Disney gift card in an awesome prize pack. It's going to be a special giveaway, so stick around to the end of the interview to hear more about that and how you can enter it. It was a fun conversation we had, Aaron and I, so let's get to it. Here's my interview with Aaron Goldberg. We've got a lot of history to talk about today because I'm joined by Aaron Goldberg, who is the best-selling author of several books, including The Wonders of Walt Disney World, Meet the Disney brothers, the Disney story chronicling the man, the mouse, and the parks, and his most recent book, Buying Disney's World, the story of how Florida Swampland became Walt Disney World. I'm so happy to talk with him today. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Connor. Thank you. I'm happy to be here and look forward to chatting.
So we have a lot to cover, and I have so many questions. I want to talk a lot about the latest book, Buying Disney's World. But I think to start, I kind of want to get into your background a little. I know
Sure.
you have a bachelor's and a master's degree in anthropology from the University of Pennsylvania. So, Aaron, my first question is, how does an Ivy League educated anthropologist start writing books about the Disney company?
That's a great question. And in some weird way, it sort of, I guess, does tie back to anthropology and my love for culture and, who else really shaped the culture of the 20th century other than Walt Disney. So, not really intending to go. I didn't really have the intentions of going these routes, of writing several books about Disney or Walt. But we all it's sort of like a rite of passage for many of us. We go to the parks as kids. We watch Disney movies. We sit in front of the television, see Disney. It's everywhere. You go to the supermarket, buy your Disney food. And I guess, as I grew older and got a little bit up there in years and started visiting the parks, as an adult, I sort of took on a new appreciation for, listen, I love the parks. I love the music. I love everything about Disney. I love the movies. However, my sweet spot is really Walt. And how, like, most of these ideas really came from one person. I mean, obviously, I know there are people along the way that helped a lot, but, the catalyst for Disney is Walt and Roy. So I sort of, I started reading anything and everything I could on the subject matter. And when I ran out of things to read, I started just doing research myself. And I figured, okay, well, there's some answers there's some questions I still need answered. And I'm going to do some research and see if I could, create a book. Maybe some people have the same questions that I do. So here we are.
Yeah.
A bunch of books later.
Yeah, a bunch of books later for sure. And I think that your story is so similar to a lot of people, and it's something that I try to tell my friends as well who might not understand my obsession with Disney. I say, yeah, you go there when you're a kid and you go on the rides when you're a kid, but until your, medulla oblongata takes full development and you start to really understand how big of an engineering feat or a man-made feat it is, that's when you truly start to appreciate the parks. And, you do it in so many ways. You did it through learning more and learning about the backstories. And I know you talk a lot about that in The Wonders of Walt Disney World, one of your books, where you dive into your favorite attractions. You talk about the backstories at all of them. But what draws you to these backstories of attractions? Because I always find it so interesting that we as Disney fans can be so intrigued by the smallest of details, the smallest of stories. You're kind of talking about how you wanted to get your hands on everything, on all the stories. But when it comes to how the magic was made, what do you think is that thing? What's that item that pulls us in to wanting to know more about these backstories?
I think you really hit the nail on the head. It's so much about the details. I mean, I'm a lover of history. Obviously, I'm a lover of culture, and I'm a lover of paying attention to the things around me, and theme parks especially. It's so much about the details. So all too often we enter Magic Kingdom, we basically rush down Main Street, or most people rush down Main Street, and either you go left or you go right, and you go onto the attractions. But like, there's details everywhere. Everything there is intentionally put there, from colors to numbers to, I mean, everything. And what captivates me is it's really the details of everything, how everything comes together and works together. And if you see something there, it was very much intentionally put there. And that to me is kind of remarkable to think about. You can go to Six Flags, or you can go to any other kind of theme, Hershey Park, whatever. And yeah, I mean, there's details, but it's not like there's legacy, there's history, there's winks and nods to folks who worked on these projects. There's winks and nods to American history or history in France. It's really just it's remarkable. It's like nothing else we know.
Yeah, and that whole notion of tying it back to, the people that created the parks, I think is so important. And you write so much about it as well. I kind of want to shift into, the book that you wrote about. There's a couple books that you've written that focus on the people that built the parks, and in particular, Walt himself. You've written a lot about the company, and in particular, its leadership. And in Meet the Disney Brothers, I like that you focus on that dynamic, interesting relationship between Walt and his brother, Roy. And, I was doing a little research, and I came across another interview you did, and, you've mentioned how at times when Disney was really flourishing, it's when they had two people at the top. One person who was in charge of the creative, another person who was charging the business style of things. With Walt and Roy, you had Walt with the creativity, you had Roy with the finances. You had Michael Eisner with the creativity, you had Frank Wells with the finances. This is kind of a two-part question, but first, I totally agree with you in that regard. I think when Disney flourishes, it's because those are kind of that yin and yang top approach leadership. But how would you explain the success that Bob Iger was able to have leading the company when it seemed like he was both the creative and the business mind? And then also looking into the future, do you see things changing with Bob Chapek as the CEO now, not necessarily taking that we have one creative, we have one finance, one business style of approach? It doesn't seem like it's going that way anymore.
Oof. I'm almost afraid to give you my real feelings on some of this.
That's all right.
But I will, because I don't know. I have no inner monologue or censor. So Here we go. So I think, it's interesting, because I think a lot of what went on with Walt and Roy, it was a family business. I mean, that's what it was. There's stories of when Disneyland was coming together and Walt was using outside companies to develop things. One of them was Arrow Manufacturing. Mm-hmm. And Arrow lost money on a bunch of the projects. And Walt and Roy basically, in passing, inquired, hey, are you guys okay? How did you make out? And they were honest. They said, we lost money. And, through a conversation, Walt, I don't remember if it was Walt or Roy. I think it was Walt, finds out that they lost money. Whatever they lost, Walt made them whole again. He sent them a check to get them, even and straight. He couldn't deal with them losing money on the enterprise. So there's those little touches of greatness that it was their company that they paid, special attention to, obviously. And I think Eisner and Wells, I mean, that was a remarkable combination. I think everybody who follows the company can't help but think what happened if, tragically Wells didn't pass away. How would things be now? I mean, obviously we might not see Iger here, at the position he's in. You don't know. I mean, it could just cascade a lot of different ways. And as for Iger, I mean, I think Iger, a lot of it, from what I'm reading and from what I hear and people I talk to, a lot of it was personality. Mm. He was a creative, but he also was in the business long enough to know, the budgets and the finances and the things like that. He knew the monetary aspect. I mean, he did enough acquisitions to certainly understand how that works. And he, phenomenal purchases with, Lucas and Marvel and, things like that. But I think, people seem to really like him. I mean, they couldn't get the Pixar deal done because Jobs and Eisner, just hate each other. And I think the same thing happened, with Lucas. He wasn't going to sell, and, he would sell to the right person. He thought, who would take good care of it. And, that being Iger. So I think he straddled the line of creativity and finance. And, I guess it'll be seen as to what's going to shake out here with the current regime, but I'm not very optimistic. We all, as a community in general, we complain about, so many different changes. It is, change is part of the gig, but I don't know. I said it to me, it's a little troubling that he's a finance person at the helm and not a creative person. There's, like, as you said, there's no yin yang, there's no checks and balances. It's just kind of, okay, well, I mean, I guess we're going to see how it goes,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
I don't know what you're talking about. No one in this community gets mad about anything, Aaron.
No,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
not us.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely not on Twitter or anything like that.
no,
Everything's hunky
yeah,
dory. Life is good.
yep,
But that's so true.
yep,
It was Walt and Roy's company, so I think they had a different relationship and attachment to it for sure. That made them do decisions that even when they went public, they didn't necessarily had to. They could supersede the board in a lot of ways because, Walt built it, Roy built it. There
yep,
was always that sort of thing, and Disney World, I think, also Disneyland were two ambitious projects that they could have only done when it was their own company. I
right.
think it would be very, very hard if they came in later to someone else's company and tried to build this. Huge projects that only two yin and yang sorts of people, but two people who started a company could really do. So I totally agree with you on that. And I think that that's also a great transition to kind of shift into your latest book, Buying Disney's World, the story of how Florida Swampland became Walt Disney World. I have it here, and I knew as soon as I saw it, I had to have it. I read it in like
Awesome.
2 days. It was so great, and I knew as I was reading it, I was like, I got to get Aaron on to talk about it.
I'm
Because,
honored.
yeah, because for me, and I'm sure you're probably the same way. I always knew the story of how Disney bought up the land under dummy companies that they set up so that the price wouldn't get driven up. But that was really it. I'd read a lot of books about the building of Disney World, but typically in those books, there's one chapter and one chapter only dedicated to the buying of the land. So when I saw that there was a whole book dedicated to it, I knew I had to read it because I knew it was going to fill out the story so much more for me. So for you, Aaron, what drew you, what compelled you to focus on this specific topic for one singular book?
You basically answered you answered the question of what you just said. Absolutely 100%. We all know the story roughly. We know I4 was the name of a company. They dummy corporations. Blah 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 blah. If anybody pays remote attention to Disney history, and so many of us get sucked in from going to the parks, we know the story. But I felt like there was so much lacking in the story. There were so many gaps and holes that I needed more information. I needed to know more than that. I needed to know more than how did it all come to be. The land purchase. I needed everything that you basically just said. I felt the same way. So I went on a sort of a mission here to find out some more information. And I was fortunate enough to find out that Robert Foster, the attorney who basically led up Disney's charge here to buy the land, had left his notes, his manuscript, everything and anything he had for the land purchases, he left to the University of Central Florida. And they have it in their archives. And I went in there several times and poured over the information and tried to cobble the story together with my own knowledge and some other, interviews and tertiary things that I was able to put together to make this whole, sort of like a somewhat complete book of how it came to be, from basically starting with, Walt's first days in Florida, and that goes back to his childhood.
Yeah, and that was super interesting. I never knew that I guess you could say relationship, or that Walt had ties to the Central Florida area before that. So that was a really cool way to start the book. And you mentioned it a little bit with the Robert Foster and his documents that you were able to look up at UCF. But we're talking about events that took place more than 50 years ago. Since Walt Disney World is celebrating its 50th anniversary in a few days here, we're talking about topics that go back quite a bit. So when it comes to researching this book, you said you started with the Robert Foster documents, but how did you find out about those, and how did you think this is going to become all about buying Disney's World, but more so, what then did lead you to the next thing? Like, Robert Foster was the start, but what was the next kind of piece of the puzzle of that book?
So I think in some weird way, I have to thank COVID for this one, because I was in UCF's archives several times, and I think as early as 2016, 2015, 2016, around there. And I was in there looking through things for my book, the Disney Story. And, they have, a ton of just, I don't even want to say stuff. There's a lot of information in there. So I was, making my way through it, and I came across a bunch of Foster's documents, and I just started snapping pictures. Like, I didn't even know what I would do with it, but I had my iPad there, and I'm just snapping pictures to remember what's there for when I get back home and see what I could do with this. So I published, I really wanted to tell this story for a bunch of years, but I couldn't get it together mentally. Like, I had all these notes from Foster, but I had to like build up in my head to, well, we still have to tell the story of how we even got to that point. Like, how do we even get to Walt Disney World? There's so many things before that. There's, Walt's success. There's the World's Fair. There's this and that. And I don't think logistically in my mind, I was ready to like really sit down and go through all these things and sort of outline it and chart it till I could get to the Foster, to tell this Foster story. Because a big chunk of buying Disney's World, like the last two chapters are like basically half the book.
Yeah.
But I had to get us to that point, and I, for whatever reason, had a mental block where I couldn't get it together. So COVID hits, we're all stuck at home, and I start pouring over all the photographs on my iPad that I took, and I finally said, you know what? Like, I can't sit in the house anymore. I'm going crazy. I'm actually going to try and write this. I was originally going to call it Roy Disney's World, because basically, it came to fruition because of Roy. And I always think, Roy doesn't get enough credit. But then I was like, well, I don't know. I went back and forth, but I felt like, it was really the heart of the story is that the interesting things that most folks don't know are the purchases. So I figured, let's go with buying Disney's World. So COVID hits, and I sit down and sort of chain myself to my desk and start, outlining and getting things together and sort of start telling the story of, Florida and how we got to doing some land purchases in the early 1960s.
Yeah, I love that shout out to Roy there. I too don't think he gets enough credit, but I do love the title. I think you went with the right title for this book. As you're chained to your desk in the heights of COVID, was there any point where you hit a wall and you're like, I'm missing a piece of this puzzle. I don't think I can finish this. Or as you started pulling things together, as you started to get more serious, did it just kind of start falling into place for you?
I'm a very OCD person. I'm very all or nothing. And once I usually like fully commit, it's on. Like, I'll sit at my desk for 12, 15 hours a day and just get this going.
Yeah.
To the point where, I think that I basically had a rough draft manuscript of this book in 2 months, and I just plowed through it. Wow. Like Meet the Disney Brothers, I wrote in a month.
Wow.
I just literally, if I get it in my head, I just don't stop. I just keep going. But prior to, COVID sitting down the extra right, I couldn't in my head see a way to get me to basically the Robert Foster notes that I had to tell the story. And I was just like, I just have to sit down and do this. And thankfully I did. But yeah, it's always hard to start the book and end the book. Yeah. And I think this ending of this book was relatively easy, because I figured in reality, it needs to end when Roy dies, when Roy passes away. That's, a lot of, like, from 1971 on has been chronicled. We know what went on. Disney even puts out books about it. So I figured we're going to end it with, basically the end of the small family business. Not so small, but the end of the family business.
Yeah, exactly. That's crazy that it took you 2 months to just for this one, or even 1 month for the other one. Kudos to that. I don't think I could do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I never think, and every time I write a book, I always say, I'm not writing another book. Like, this is it. I'm done.
I hear that.
And then, time goes by, and yeah, here we are.
I hear that a lot. Yeah, you stumble across another story, or, you stumble across another pandemic, and you think, well, I might as well just write another book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to be passionate about it. If I don't have passion, I can't do it.
Yeah.
So the passion's easy. It's easy for me to write about Disney because it's something that's near and dear to me, like so many of us. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's I look back and I think, what did I for like 2 months? Wow, who does that?
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess it was easy with the pandemic. We really couldn't go out of the house.
Yeah, everyone was baking sourdough bread. It was a weird time, Aaron. It was a weird time.
Yep,
We were getting into different
yep,
hobbies, all sorts of things.
totally.
One of your chapters in the book is actually a famous quote. The title of one of your chapters, I should say, is actually a famous quote from Walt about how in Florida they have the blessing of size, and something as compared to California they really didn't have there. So talk a little bit about why Walt one wanted so much land, and then also why he was so upset with how the surrounding area of Anaheim around Disneyland ended up being, and then how they chose Florida to acquire all this land as the place to be.
So a totally random little tidbit is I think every chapter title, but maybe the last one. I don't have the book in front of me. Every title has a tie-in back to Disney in some way, or some, like, one chapter's Horizons.
Yeah, I was gonna say it seems like you're a huge, old
Yeah,
school Epcot fan as well, based
yeah,
on the
I
title
love
chapters.
Epcot.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so every chapter name has a tie-in, means something to Disney, or if it was a title of a short from a Mickey Mouse short, which I think the first chapter may be. But yeah, anyway, so I digress. But so how do we get to Florida? Basically, I think, what we see, I guess we each suffer from this in our own way. We see what we want to see. Somebody sees perfection, another person sees faults and flaws. So when Disneyland opens, basically, and I hate to speak for someone, so I try to, even though these are my opinions, but I try and reinforce my opinions with his direct quotes to substantiate it, because I definitely do not want to speak for Walt Disney. But he has enough quotes out there on the subject that he hated what he saw outside of the park. The perimeter became, adjacent to his parks. There was motels, there was restaurants, there were shops, and he hated that reality seeping into his Disneyland. And for whatever reason, we see perfection, we see the joy that Disneyland brings, and he saw that flaw, and it burned him up that he didn't have enough money to buy enough land. And then by the time Disneyland became a success, he still couldn't really buy the land, because it was an overnight success in a lot of ways. So then the next step in his head was, well, we're gonna have to do this again. We're gonna start over somewhere else, and we're gonna sort of right our wrongs here. And the what brings them to Florida is basically the climate. He really wanted, Disneyland was a regional park. Not many folks from the East Coast came, in the early days to see it. So he really wanted not only the East Coast, but he wanted the whole country to visit his park. So after surveying different situations, St. Louis, there was an opportunity. In New York City, there was an opportunity. Canada, there was an opportunity again. But here on the East Coast, we get problems in the Northeast on winter. So the climate very much is similar to Southern California in respect to, it's warm basically all year round, despite, there's a lot of rain in Orlando. And the land was cheap. There was really nothing there. So he was able to do enough research. The folks who did the research for Disneyland to find that land basically pinpointed Central Florida due to I-95 and Interstate 4, which would basically, hop on I-4 and get on 95 and go north, and you basically can hit the whole rest of the country. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of how the story plays out to Disney buying all the land in Florida.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's Walt's idea, but as the book kind of goes in sequence, we discover these other characters, and I love the other characters in the book. And I always say, Walt had the dreams, Roy had the ambitions and whatnot, but the smaller people, the people with the roles below them, they're the ones who are responsible for the building of the parks just as much as Walt and Roy is. They put an incredible team together, and that's how they were able to accomplish so much. And you start to discover the characters in this book, and two of the really main characters that I kind of really, really enjoyed was, we talked about him recently before, Robert Foster, who you found all of his old notes and files. He was assistant secretary and legal counsel for Disneyland. He becomes basically Walt's man on the ground, and he's just in charge of buying up all the land. But then there's this other character, Paul Helliwell. Paul Helliwell, who is this Florida attorney who's super well connected in the state. He's got some interesting background, maybe some ties to the early days of the CIA. Now, Aaron, I like to think that I know as much as one can possibly know about Disney, about Walt Disney World, but I'd never come across this guy Helliwell before. He's a great character, but just how crucial was he to that acquisition of the Florida land?
I don't think it happens without him.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. It happens. I'm sure it happens, but it doesn't happen where it is physically right now. I feel like people, like, they don't exist anymore the way this guy was. Like,
No.
You can't. First of all, you can't do many of the things that he did. And just what a remarkable life. I mean, he definitely. I mean, he was, before he's buying land for Disney, he's funding the Bay of Pigs to try and topple Cuba.
Yeah.
I mean, he had an insurance company, a bank. I mean, his bank was the front for the CIA to run money, drugs, and guns throughout the world. Was his bank. It's like, talk about leading 2, 3, 4 lives going on. He was like an honorary member of the Chinese military's parachute team. He would parachute into foreign countries, and I mean, it's insane that, obviously in 1963, 1964, you can't Google someone. So clearly nobody really knew what was going on with this guy, other than he was a prominent attorney in Miami. He was always in the society pages, so he was a well-known person. He had a lot of clout in the state, and without his connections, they would the company was running into roadblocks in each major purchase, and he basically, whatever roadblock they encountered, he like busted right through it. Didn't even like sidestep it. He just like went right through it and boom, got it done. And I don't think Disney World would be, maybe it's a little bit more north than towards Ocala, or maybe it's towards Daytona, or I don't think it would be necessarily where it is right now without him.
Or maybe it's not as big as it is today, as well.
Or you're right. Or actually, it might not even be a municipality. The Reedy Creek may not exist, because it basically, Helliwell's finagling and pushing for the legislation and writing the legislation and getting it passed. Without him, it may not be. Probably isn't.
Yeah, they don't make him like Paul Helliwell anymore. It was like,
no,
he's a straight out of a Robert Ludlum novel kind of character.
Yep.
But when you first stumble upon him and you start doing more research, were you just like, oh, this can't be true. Oh, that can't be true. This can't be true. No way can this be true. Just like every subsequent thing you learn about him, it's like, there's no way this can just be one guy.
Yeah, I could not. I just couldn't wrap my brain around. I mean, I know people like this exist in history. I think it's a little bit more difficult now to do these things. I'm sure stuff does still go on covertly, obviously, and things like that. But to go basically, I was sitting in front of newspapers.com searching his name basically every year from like the 1930s up through the 70s, and it was literally story after story after story of whatever he was doing. And I was just a remarkable life. I wish that, he has a daughter. I think that's still around. I reached out to her a couple of times, because honestly, like, I think his story would be incredible to tell, and I haven't been able to make, contact there. But like, I kind of was just kind of blown away at what I would encounter. Every story was something new. I was like, wow, this is insane. And this is the guy who Walt Disney trusted. Obviously, is great with secrets. But who knows to what extent Walt and Roy knew what he was doing. I'm sure Helliwell was not, talking about what he was doing, during 9 to 5, somewhere else. And but still, I mean, it's just crazy.
Hey there, I just wanted to take a quick break and mention a sponsor of the show, and it's actually a total shameless plug, because the sponsor is my travel agent services. If you've been listening to the show for a while now, you probably know just how difficult it is to plan the perfect Walt Disney World vacation. Even in the past few years since the WDW Opinion podcast has started, it has only become more and more confusing, to plan for and get to Walt Disney World. Things like knowing when to book what, how to book what, how to navigate around all the new features of the parks, or even how to navigate around the new technologies in the parks. It can all be challenging. Whether it is Disney Genie, Magic Mobile services, Park Pass reservations, or all the new reservation systems in place, it can seem like you practically need a master's degree just to book a Disney vacation. Luckily, that's where your boy Connor comes in. As a Disney fanatic, I know the place like the back of my hand. As a travel agent, I participate in training to keep me up to date on all the latest features at Walt Disney World and to keep me up to date on all the latest offerings, special offerings, things like that, deals. Plus, it also helps me stay up to date on all of the current special events, all that fun stuff. The training just keeps me in the loop. And as a former Walt Disney World cast member, I have the behind-the-scenes knowledge and expertise that I can share with you to help you navigate the parks like a pro. All of these elements combined, me being a Disney fanatic, me being a Disney travel agent, me being a former Walt Disney World cast member, makes me the perfect fit for you when it comes to booking your next perfect Disney vacation. I do the boring stuff like finding deals, booking the trip, waiting on hold with Disney for hours, waking up super early to get dining reservations and special event ticket reservations. I do all of it so that you don't have to. Let me do this for you so that you can focus on the most important aspect of a Disney vacation, having fun. You have fun. I do the lame stuff to ensure you have a better time. The best part about this is that my services are 100% free to use. You don't have to pay a dime to utilize my expertise. It doesn't cost you anything extra. In fact, it can help you save money because I'm constantly looking for the best offers. But don't just take my word for it. Hear it from former clients who have already utilized my services, like David M. from Maryland, who says, when it came to mapping out what would be best each day, what restaurants would be open or closed, what the flow of the parks would be like each day based on what was open, which was changing up until we arrived, Connor was always on point and he anticipated our every need. You should really take the time to invest in Connor services. You won't be disappointed. Thanks to David for that kind review. And if you are ready to book your next trip, whether it's to Walt Disney World, Disneyland, Disney Cruise Line, or Adventures by Disney, reach out to me at Connor, C-O-N-O-R, at WDWOpinion.com, and I can help you with all of that. Again, reach out to me at Connor, C-O-N-O-R, at WDWOpinion.com, C-O-N-O-R, at WDWOpinion.com, and I can help you plan a trip with my free-to-use services. Now, let's get back to the show. Well, I think it puts it really into perspective as well as to how big this endeavor was, that you needed someone who was funding the Bay of Pigs, basically, to kind of get this going. And we know that Disney wants all this land. They have boots on the ground in Florida. They decide that the best way to do all this, to acquire all this land, is to start buying it in chunks under different fake companies. Because they know if they just were to knock on the door and say, "Hi, I'm from the Walt Disney Productions," the price was going to soar. So they come up with all these fake companies, and that's the story we kind of know about buying of the land for Walt Disney World. But they have this plan in place, and then two big hurdles come about when it comes to acquiring the land. That is buying the parcels that were sold by Munger Farms, and then also getting the mineral rights to certain areas. Can you talk a little bit about what those two processes entailed and how Disney was able to kind of forge ahead and conquer those two challenges?
Absolutely. And I think the whole mineral rights thing is like, it's just a crazy, that whole concept to me is crazy. And I know that I think to some extent it still sort of goes on in the state of Florida, where I think not too long ago, in the past few years, there was something towards Tampa, where a builder built a bunch of homes, and he sold the mineral rights, and they wanted to go prospect for oil or something. And these people are like, wait a minute, we bought $300,000-$400,000 homes here. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And it ended up in the courts. So basically, it was a similar situation. So Tufts University in Boston owned what was known as the mineral rights. So back in the day, or even obviously currently, someone could own the rights on the surface, and somebody could own the rights for below. And the two cousins who owned the big chunk of land, which is Magic Kingdom and Epcot now, they owned the land, the surface rights, but they did not own the mineral rights. Tufts University did. So they had repeatedly tried to obtain the rights, and what that meant is, so if somebody owned the mineral rights, that meant they could go on your property, and basically if you build a house, they'll knock the house down and go search for whatever they're trying to search for, and they have every right to do that. So Disney was encountered with, so we want to buy this land. It's 8,000 or 9,000 acres, but we don't own the mineral rights. So in comes Paul Hellowell, who back in the day had a buddy, another colonel in the CIA, who knew someone who was on the board of board of trustees at Tufts University. Makes a phone call, basically gets a sit down invite to speak with the board of trustees, and finagles and wrangles away the mineral rights, so Disney now can do whatever they want on that property. And that's like, I think I'm gonna say, I might get the number wrong, but I think it was about, they bought the rights for like $16,000.
Wow.
Which is, little did they know what was going on there, but yeah, I'm sure they wish they sold for some more.
Yeah, and again, Hellowell comes in, to save the day in that regard as well.
Just makes a few phone calls, and he sits down and negotiates, and basically says, the land is worthless. It's worthless. There's no minerals there. They would look for phosphorus. They would look for oil. There's nothing there. You owning it, you're a university, you want money, you always want money. And by holding on to these, you're losing money. So here's your opportunity to cash in and sell what's meaningless. And they did. And little did they know, a few years later, Walt Disney World would be built. Yeah, because of that. And the Munger Farms was similar. It wasn't a mineral rights thing, but it was this man, Willis Munger, would sell parcels of land out of the back of magazines and newspapers. And I actually came across an ad included in the book. And for $5 down and $5 a month, you could own basically a 5-acre piece of land in Central Florida. Much of this land was underwater. Most people never saw it. And there were all these parcels. They were just scattered everywhere. And basically someone took, like the map of the land and just drew just drew like boxes all over the land and would assign ownership to 1 box or 2 boxes or 3 boxes. So Foster would basically had to go around the country calling or face-to-face and buying these parcels of land from, family members or whoever still owned the land. We're talking about, 50 years later, it's still in the family. He would have to go there and try and buy these parcels so that Disney wouldn't have people owning land inside of their land, which sounds crazy in itself. And something I found after the fact, Willis Munger, who was so it's Munger Farms, that was his land. I came across something in the 30s that he actually worked for Disney. Wow. He was the merchandising or the licensing representative for the country of Canada for Disney's intellectual property, for Mickey Mouse and things like that. And then here, and I'm sure Disney had made no connection to this, but just me searching over documents, I found that he actually worked for the Disney company for a few years in the 30s. And here, 30 years later, they would end up buying what was marketed by him, called Munger Farms.
Those sorts of connections give me like goosebumps. I'm like, "Ooh, that is so crazy." Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I mean,
read this article and I was like, "Wait a minute, is this?" And I got to read this again. And I was doing research on Disney's, like, the original marketing guy. His name was Kay Kamen. Mm-hmm. So I was doing research on Kay Kamen, trying to get a little background, and I came across basically like a press release from, I think, 36 or 37, saying that Willis Munger of Missouri is now going to head up the licensing and merchandising for the country of Canada. And I was like, wait a minute, Willis Munger, Missouri, there's the town. And I went back to look at the Munger Farm ads, and I'm like, oh, there we go.
Wow.
That's him.
That's him, as light as day.
That's
And
what are the chances of that one? Yeah.
it's wild to think that. And just like I said, the Disney connection to Central Florida as well. That's wild.
Yep.
It's just so interesting. And I know they were able to buy up pretty much most of the land, but I think one of the interesting things that to this day is still there is the Bonnet Creek Resort area. How it's just in the middle of Walt Disney World property, but that's kind of like that was the Waterloo, right? That was the one they weren't
Yeah.
quite able to conquer, right? That wasn't a part of the Munger
Yeah.
lands. That was just a bigger one, right? I can't remember.
Yes. Yeah, that was just a bigger the owner was in Asia and bought it like honestly like 2 years, a year or two before they were into the Disneys were interested in the property. The man was in Asia and he basically was speculating, thinking, all right, it's not too far from the Space Coast. It's pretty much undeveloped. Maybe I could put warehouses here because we're not too far from highways. And there was just no interest in them selling to the Disneys. And as you said, I think it one side of the properties is the back of I-4 and the other three faces Disney property.
Yeah.
So there was an easement, obviously, and for Disney to get through and do whatever. But still, it's kind of crazy that smack dab in the middle of like this sovereign Disney property is, this rogue piece.
Yeah.
A couple hundred acres.
Intruders. Some nice hotels, but intruders.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
But they do still, even with Bonnet Creek, with not getting that, they still have all this land. Now they have to build on it. Now they have to operate it. And you mentioned it a little bit, how Helliwell was kind of writing this legislation, but the idea of the Reedy Creek Improvement District comes into play. And the idea was that Disney was going to have control over all their land when it comes to, giving out permits, construction, waterways, stuff like that. And that was super rare for a private company to be in charge of all of it. But how does this come about, this idea? And then Walt was also hesitant about going down this route, wasn't he?
So, there was a big chunk of the story, I guess, that like the elephant in the room here was Walt Disney World was obviously, when Walt was still around, unfortunately he died before, he got to pursue any of these dreams. What the idea was basically the theme park would have been secondary and Epcot would have been the primary, and it would have been, the city of tomorrow. People would work there, live there. It was green before anything was even really green. No cars, things like that, or cars would be excluded to a certain level underground. That was like the grandiose plans for the Florida property. And so in having to do that, Walt needed control of everything. Initially, he was hesitant. He received advice from Jules Stein, who was the head of Universal Studios, who had not necessarily exactly same situation, but a similar situation. He had trouble dealing with Los Angeles County and the city of Los Angeles, and he was telling Walt, don't do a municipality, don't do it. It's going to give you a headache. And everybody, all the attorneys and advisors and Robert Foster was like, no. He's wrong. Don't listen to him. We need the municipality. You need to control everything about this. So that's sort of how, it came about. And then the pitch to the state was basically, it would boil down to like, who's going to say no to Disney? So, you say no, all the, the state representatives are afraid if they said no or they pushed back on some of these things that Disney would say goodbye and leave. So obviously they basically got the keys. I hate to say it, the keys to the kingdom. And they had the situation they wanted. And unfortunately, Walt passed away. So the plan that they sold the state on for this utopian community or this different community never came to fruition. Who else could complete that? I mean, but Walt Disney. Nobody else really could tackle that the way he would. So here you have Disney with, basically their own little sovereign state within a county, within two counties, and people were a little annoyed or a little pissed that it didn't come to fruition what was originally sold to them.
Yeah, I get that, but at the same time, and I know you commented on it in the book as well, that thing might not have occurred, but Walt Disney World changed Florida forever, and Central Florida in particular. And a lot of that would not have occurred without the Reedy Creek Improvement District. I also find it so funny that Universal told Disney not to do it. Disney didn't listen to the guy in charge of Universal. And now, flash forward, 50 some odd years later, in Orlando, Universal would love to have the same kind of access that Disney has with the Reedy Creek Improvement District. That's just kind of funny.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. I mean, who wouldn't want to have that control?
Yeah.
And I guess in some respects, maybe some wouldn't because they don't want the responsibility. But I mean, even without Epcot, I mean, it's a town. There are two towns there, obviously, but it is literally. I mean, everything that goes on in any town USA basically goes on, on Walt Disney World property. What doesn't go on down there? You sleep, you eat, there's adjacent hospitals, everything's there. It is a town. It has an infrastructure. It does provide, efficiently and effectively everything you need. So they did fulfill, I mean, not to be a Disney apologist, but they did fulfill in some respects, what they set out to do. And the tax dollars that, the counties reap and the state reaps, and, the Florida, as you said, Florida would never be the same. I mean, sure, who knows what it would be if they never came, or if the state pushed back and Disney decided not to come. I think you'd have like a lot of that Central Florida would be like Lakeland, or it just wouldn't be. What would it really be?
It wouldn't be the number one tourist destination in the world. That's for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I am a former cast member too at Walt Disney World, and I know what the infrastructure is like, and that it couldn't happen. It couldn't occur. The daily operations, what's needed. The Reedy Creek is the necessary item for that place to operate.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you're researching and writing this book, I assume you've gained a greater appreciation for Walt Disney World. You've already said, you're a huge Walt Disney fan, but this was a massive project. And we've talked a lot about a lot of great stories in the book, and there's so many more incredible stories in the book. But was there one particular anecdote that you came across where you were just like, I mean, this is insane. The scale is so insane. Or rather, by the time you were done writing it, what kind of impressed you the most about this whole mission, this whole project?
That's a great question. To pick, there were two. There's one little tidbit, and it's sort of minor in a sense, and it's also like, I'm going to sound like a Disney apologist, but there's a quote by Roy, who basically, when it came down to, and I never thought about it this way, and everybody, and if you go online or you Google or whatever, and you see people say, oh, they fooled so many people, and they duped them into selling the land super cheap, and they exploited them, and this, that, the other. They didn't announce it. It was so sneaky, and I mean, whatever. I mean, they're still a business.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, Walt could really give a rat's ass about money. It wasn't ever about accumulating wealth. It was about accumulating more money to do more projects. He didn't really care about that aspect. He wanted to reinvest it back in the business. But there's a quote by Roy, or maybe it was by Robert Foster about Roy, and he basically says, we have to buy this land and not get hurt. So we have to buy it at a number where if we have to walk away, we're not going to hurt our shareholders. So I thought about that, and I was like, wow, you know what? I mean, look at that hindsight. So yeah, I mean, obviously you could say whatever you want about how they purchased the land and tactics they went through, but at the end of the day, they were still trying to protect themselves. So if they had to walk away from buying over 20,000 acres in Florida, was it going to bankrupt the company and, force them down a different road? That's something they would never want to do. I mean, they leveraged and mortgaged so many things before, with Snow White, with Mickey Mouse, there's so many things that over time, obviously, these are the tricks of the trade that Roy knew. And I always thought that was, I mean, there's a lot to take away from this book, but that to me was a pretty interesting concept, that he was always mindful of. He's got to please his brother. The project has to go on, but we can't hurt the shareholders and we can't hurt ourselves. So we need to buy this at a reasonable price, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is.
And anything having to do with Paul Hellowell.
Yeah.
It's like any story with Paul Hellowell, I'm here for it. I'm ready.
Yeah,
Like
man.
I was all in, but I really thought that there was a little long-winded answer there, but I thought that Roy's take on we have to do the right move in case this goes bad. I
No,
thought that was interesting.
that's super interesting. It's a great tidbit, especially considering that it didn't go bad. It went great, and I think we're all the better for it as Disney fans. That was really, really, really cool. And Aaron, this has been incredible, man. We talked a lot
I
about
appreciate it.
a lot of stories, but there's so many more stories in the book and in all of your books. I want to thank you for taking the time to be with me today. I had a blast, and I know we'll have you back on soon to do a more in-depth dive on your other books as well. But for now, where can the listeners find you on the interwebs? Where can they learn more about you?
I'm pretty active on Twitter, and I'm pretty active on Instagram. Both are at Aaron H. Goldberg. When you go to aaronhgoldberg.com, my books are basically anywhere and everywhere you can buy a book. You'll find some of my books there: Audible, iTunes, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. The usual suspects.
And of course, we're going to have links to all of that, links to where you can buy Aaron's book in the show notes page on WDWOpinion.com. We will send all of that out to the listeners. But Aaron, thank you again for joining me today.
Connor, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, and I love chatting with you. Look forward to another session.
Me too.
Thanks so much to Aaron Goldberg for joining me on the show today. Like I said earlier, we are doing a giveaway with some of the awesome books Aaron has wrote. He was so gracious to send me some signed copies of his books, and we're going to be giving away those books and a couple other fun things as well. Enter the contest, and you'll be entered into a drawing for a chance to win a prize pack that includes a signed copy of Buying Disney's World, the book we just talked about, and Aaron's newest book, fantastic book. It's a signed copy. We'll also be giving away a signed copy of The Disney Brothers, also by Aaron. I'm going to include a signed copy of my book, From Yacht Club to Diamond Mine, all about my time as a Walt Disney World cast member. And the prize pack will also include a $50 Disney gift card, which you can use at shopdisney.com. You can use it on your next Disney vacation, all that jazz. I'm also going to include some surprise WDW Opinion goodies as well. So it's all one big prize package with a signed copy of Buying Disney's World, a signed copy of The Disney Brothers, a signed copy of my book, From Yacht Club to Diamond Mine, a $50 Disney gift card, and some WDW Opinion goodies. One big old prize pack. You can win it. Here's how. This contest is going to work. You're going to head to wdwopinion.com/119, where you will see the contest on that page. Fill out the form there, click the links and actions. All those things will add more entries. So if you add your name in, your email, that'll serve as one entry. There are subsequent actions you can take to get entered into the giveaway more and more and more. The more drawings you enter, obviously, the higher likelihood you will have of winning. Actions like leaving a podcast review, subscribing to our YouTube channel, following our social media handles, sharing the contest on social, they will all earn you extra entries into the drawing for the contest. Plus, if you just go back to that page, wdwopinion.com/119, if you go back to that page every day and click the same button, it will continue to enter more extra drawings into the contest for you. So there's so much stuff. You can just simply put in your name and email and enter it once, or you can go above and beyond, do the podcast reviews, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our social media handles. All of those actions will give you bonus entries into the contest and will increase your likelihood of getting this awesome prize pack. One lucky winner, one person, one lucky winner will be selected, and this contest will close on Saturday, October 23rd at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. So be sure to enter before then. And again, head to wdwopinion.com/119 to enter the giveaway. The giveaway, Buying Disney's World,
Disney Brothers, From Yacht Club to Timeline, those 3 books, signed copies, $50 Disney gift card, WDW Opinion goodies as well. You have until Saturday, October 23rd at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. Head to wdwopinion.com/119. Enter that giveaway. And if you do want to learn more info about Aaron's books, if you want to book or just buy some of his other books, head over to wdwopinion.com/119, where we'll have links to all of that fun stuff. As a reminder, please do me a huge favor and listen to our latest offering, our Disney news show called News to Opinion. New episode coming out on Thursday about Genie Plus. A lot of good stuff there. If you enjoyed today's episode and you're on YouTube, be sure to hit the like button, leave a comment, let me know you enjoyed, and subscribe to the channel as well. For those peeps listening on Apple, please be sure to subscribe and rate and review the show on there. I'll be sure to read future reviews on the show, like this one from Amy Page 112233. She says, "Awesome Disney podcast from a true fan," and gives us 5 stars, 5 out of 5 stars. She goes on to say, Connor is clearly so passionate and knowledgeable about all things Disney. And I love his in-depth analysis of what's going on at the best place in the world. Thank you so much for that awesome review, Amy Page. I am happy my love of Disney comes across via the show, and I appreciate the time you took out of your day to leave that awesome review. It helps us back out big time. I love getting them, so thank you very, very, very much for leaving that great review. If you want to have a review read on the air like Amy's just was, you can scroll to the bottom of our Apple Podcast feed and leave a review that way, or you can head to wdwopinion.com/review to discover more detailed information on how to leave one. If you listen on Spotify, please click the follow button on the show page, as that will help us out as well. In between episodes, the best way to talk Disney with me is to join the WDW Opinioneers Facebook group. You can connect with your fellow Disney fanatics over there and talk Disney all the time. You can join that group by going to wdwopinion.com/opinioneers. That's OPINIONEERS. If you're ready to book your next vacation to Walt Disney World, I would love to help you do that. As a travel agent, I can help you find the best deals, answer any questions you have, book dining reservations for you, and I'm going to be an advocate for you, someone you can turn to for advice. The best part is that this service is 100% free to use. It doesn't cost you a dime. You can reach out to me at Connor, CONOR, at wdwopinion.com, and I can help you book a trip. Of course, if there is ever anything I could ever do to help you, I am more than happy to try and do so. Just reach out to me at Connor, CONOR, at wdwopinion.com. If you have any questions or need anything at all, I would love to hear from you. That's going to do it for me this week. If you liked what you heard today, then you've been listening to the WDW Opinion Podcast. If by chance you didn't like what you heard, then you've been listening to Marvel's Wastelanders, Hawkeye. I've been Connor Brown, and until next time, keep LTD, living the dream, and I'll see ya real soon.